Two things I love about Between the Bare-Enemies music are how far into linearity they go and how big the scope of their music is. One of the ways they create this sense of bigness, especially on Parallax 2, is by fusing all these long songs together into an even larger whole. And what better place to talk about linearity and song transitions than at the apex of both in the superb, seamless transition out of Bloom and into Melting City. I had eagerly anticipated Parallax 2 all those years ago, and when it was released I listened to the whole thing on headphones with my eyes closed. I knew the track listing and I was surprised that I couldn't tell where Bloom ended and where Melting City began. It just felt like this continuous high velocity string of notes. Of course, this isn't the only linear section or the only cool song transition in BTBAM's discography, but I think it just might be the longest and is probably at least tied with Son of Nothing into Ants of the Sky for the coolest. And I'm going to argue that it's not just cool for its own sake, but it also makes sense at this exact point on the album. First, let's look at it a little more closely. When I say it's linear, I of course don't mean it's entirely new ideas constantly. None of the ideas are repeated exactly, but it is made of a few motives that are sequenced, so moved up and down in pitch space, and metrically transformed, so added to and subtracted from. It's also harmonically and metrically unstable. It's pretty chromatic, outlining some diminished and whole tone type stuff, and is also metrically irregular. All this conspires to give the effect of extreme forward momentum. But where is this momentum leading? The answer to this is a little more complicated than it might seem. For one thing, it's not leading right to the start of Melting City, because the point where the track changes is actually still just more diminished chords. It's definitely not harmonically resolved yet. This is a really cool trick to make it seem seamless, where you switch tracks but you don't have any sort of like musical marker necessarily, or like harmonic resolution or textural change or anything that you normally get at the start of a new track. And then they could have made a much more obvious resolution at the end of these diminished chords, maybe something like this. I borrowed this riff because this is exactly what happens in the other really dramatic transition that I mentioned before between Son of Nothing and Ants of the Sky, which I also have a video about, or kind of about that, from a while ago. Similar to this transition on Parallax 2, the one from Colors is still all diminished chords when the track name changes. But that one comes to land on a riff that really clearly hammers on the tonic. So there's after that, you know, the harmonic instability carries over after the change of track, but it does come to a clear landing place, clear harmonic resolution, just a little bit into Ants of the Sky. All that is to say that the resolution isn't nearly as clear here in Melting City, because instead of following this diminished / harmonic minor descending run with a clear tonic, we get a couple quick chugs, then more diminished stuff. And we think maybe the clear resolution will come now. And yet we just get 2 more times through this riff with a couple tonic chugs and then these diminished climbing things, and then it's on to the next riff, which kind of also doesn't give us a clear tonic. So yeah, I guess these chugs will have to count as the harmonic resolution, but I think the fleeting nature of them is really cool. It's like we follow up this high momentum section with just more momentum. I think there's a really nuanced and cool way of composing where instead of doing the satisfying thing and following up a section that feels like it's tumbling forward with a big obvious harmonic payoff, they just like transmute that energy into even more momentum and keep on running. Now it's time for some interpretation. I said earlier that this extreme transition makes sense at this exact point on the album. Normally I don't spend much time talking about lyrics or concepts, and I always have to do some thinking to remember what the story of this big concept album is.
There are two characters called Prospect 1 and Prospect 2, and they have a strange mind link, and the album starts at the end, and they have to blow up a planet or the sun or something by ramming their spaceship into it. And they have all these dreams and hallucinations, and there are the night owls that control everything, and there's also a box with a note in it that someone is supposed to read.
And normally I think the lyrics kind of came after the music and don't necessarily relate to it super directly. But the link here to the music is too clear to pass up. And here's why. Basically, the shift from Bloom to Melting City is a big one in a few senses. In the narrative, so in the story of the concept album, Bloom is like a hallucination slash flashback about jellyfish, and it takes place underwater. And Melting City takes place in a different time or level of reality, and it's in space or on a different planet or something. And the gap isn't just narrative, but also generic, as in relating to genre. There seems to be a big distance genre-wise between the wacky surf rock carnival music of Bloom and the cooled off interstellar space death metal of Melting City. This distance must be bridged somehow, and the transition does the job. The repeatedly climbing fragments can even be heard as a sonic analog for the ascent from the bottom of the ocean to another planet. Anyway, here's this whole transition with the recording. May Queen C take you in. See ya.